Hey all, today we are gonna do a bit of detective work. Or rather, I will be presenting a little bit of detective work that I have done. So, if you've ever been to my channel before, you will know that I am so interested in Opeth tones. I'm pretty obsessed with that. As a hobbyist musician, I have a lot of things that I love to do. I love to write songs. I love to engineer. I love to nerd out on gear. There's a whole lot of stuff I love to do. But, nerding Opeth gear is kind of like a hobby within a hobby for me. And, whenever I've come home from work and I'm like too tired to like really play guitar or whatever, or maybe I had a few beers the night before and I wake up on a Saturday, then I might spend like 10 hours nerding out on a cabinet or something like that. Or I might watch one of the documentaries of Opeth for like the 100th time to see if there's anything new that I'm finding out. No, it sounds crazy, but it's just what I like to do. And maybe I might use some of that in my own music, which is way overdue for a release. So hey, it's gonna come someday. Anyway, today we're gonna talk about the gear of Blackwater Park. We're gonna start with Blackwater Park because I think it's a huge album for Opeth, and it's actually pretty well documented what gear they used this time around. The next one is gonna be on Damnation and Deliverance, and on that one, boy have I done some research, and boy are we in for some surprises. I have some really extra special stuff for Damnation and Deliverance, or focusing on Deliverance, but that's for the next time. For today, we're just gonna look at the gear that Opeth used on Blackwater Park. So, without further ado, boom. This is the official list of gear that Opeth has put on their website. The Paul Reed Smith CE24, a Gibson Les Paul Custom, a Seagull S6 guitar, and a Yamaha 12-string, a Fender Jazz Bass for Martin Mendes, then some drums. I'm not a drum head, we're not going to talk about drums. A Laney VH100L, which is a really weird thing to write because that doesn't exist. There's a GH100L, which is a single channel amp with a switchable boost, and there's a VH100R, which is a two-channel amp with switchable boosts. But they're basically, the gain channels are the same, but that's two different versions of sort of the same style of amp. Then there's a Engel 100 watt amp listed here, and I actually wrote a mail to Fredrik Nordström of Studio Fredman, and he just got back to me and said that it was an Engel Savage. And what we're gonna do now is that we're gonna look at some screenshots that I've taken from the documentary of the making of Blackwater Park, and then we can see if we can find a Savage there. Lastly, a PV5150. And then a little bit of effects and so on. Not so interesting in the big picture. Anyway, let's see. Already a minute into the documentary, I found this picture here. Martin Lopez is banging out some drums, as he does best. And in the background, if you zoom in, enhance, there's an amp on the floor. And I know this looks like a bunch of mushy pixels, but actually, I'm pretty convinced that this is an Engel Savage. So far, so good, 1 minute in. Then, about 5.5 minutes in, we have a back of an amp. Let's look here. That is indeed a Laney VH100R, the two-channel Laney amp that they said they used. It's the R model, so it's the dual channel version of this amplifier. And you of course can see the front here, but you can see the back, and I have one myself. And this is for sure a VH100. Great. Let's move on. Then probably the most interesting question to ask ourselves is, what cabinet did they use on Blackwater Park? Because they're not listing, if we go back, they're not listing any cabinets. But if we go to this view here, about 11 minutes and 40 seconds into the Making of Blackwater Park documentary, we can see a cabinet. I think it's covered with something, but a few frames later, we can see a slightly different angle here, and that looks like a Marshall cabinet to me. And indeed, if you go to the Studio Fredman website of today, you can see a Marshall cabinet in his photos. And it has a, what do you call it, kind of gray or teal basket weave cloth. I think that's what we're looking at right here. And to kind of confirm that this could indeed be the same cabinet, here is a picture from the recording of Deliverance and Damnation about a year or two later, where we can see a teal/gray basket weave Marshall cabinet that has been used on Damnation and Deliverance. So I think that's the same cabinet here. Then, of course, you can ask yourself, well, which model is that exactly? I think it might be a 1960 AV or AX. And the AV would be Marshall's version of a vintage 30 speaker. A AX would be their greenback version. It can also be that this has had the speakers changed, probably for vintage 30s. It's an open question. We might have a chance of answering it in a future episode if I can get more information. But for now, I just think that it's the Marshall cabinet here that they used. And right next to it is the Engel Savage again, just standing on the floor. Then this picture here is just the seagull here behind Mendes. That's a seagull headstock. And here we can see a bunch of Vox amplifiers that might have been used on the clean tones. And finally, here is another shot of the Engel Savage. This is later on when they're recording leads, about 24 minutes and 8 seconds into the documentary. So we can see, hey, the Engel Savage was maybe used on some leads. And here is Michael Okerfeldt working on something with Steven Wilson. And I think, since Steven is there, that means that it's after the rhythm guitars and the drums and bass have been recorded, and they're working on leads and overdubs. So this is probably maybe some solo stuff for Bleak that this could have been, used on the Bleak solo for the lead tone. Then for vocals, we have a Neumann TLM 103. And we can see the same microphone used again here on the Seagull guitar. Here you can see the Seagull guitar much, much, much better. And you can see that it is a cutaway guitar. Michael has said that it was a S6, and that's also what it says on the official website. So I think that might be it. I did an episode on the Seagull S6 guitar, by the way, but not the cutaway version. But you can go back and watch that if you're interested in that. And that's the last picture. So if we go back to the official list of equipment on Blackwater Park, I forgot to take a picture of the CE24, but you can see that pretty much all over the documentary. So that's there, check. Gibson Les Paul Custom, check. That's also all over the documentary. Seagull S6 cutaway, yep. Yamaha 12-string, I didn't see it this time around. Maybe there's the Harvest music video has a few extra shots that I haven't included here. Maybe it's on that. The Fender J-Space, Marcus Miller signature used by Mendes. That is also right there. And then we have the Laney VH100R, the Angle Savage, and the PV5150 you didn't see, but I have a 6505. And let me tell you what, the 6505 is basically a PV5150. And it sounds incredibly close. And I might post a little video clip where I try to use this gear, because I do happen to have actually a VH100 and a Savage and a 6505 that we can play around with a little bit to see if we can get close to the sound of Blackwater Park in a future episode. Finally, about effects, I don't have anything to add here, really. The Boss GT3, I'm pretty sure it was there. I might have found it in another documentary on another album, but it's very well documented that Michael Åkerfeldt used it there, so I have absolutely no doubt that they brought it to the session. Then the Electroharmonic Smallstone, that's just his favorite phaser. It was all over Still Life also, so again, sort of like a effect that you hear it actually more on Still Life than you do it on Blackwater Park, but yeah, it's there. And then finally, the E-bow for those long leads. Again, pretty certain that's on it. But yeah, that's it for now. That's what I found out about Blackwater Park. If somebody happens to have some kind of extra information that could make this even more detailed or something we don't know yet, that would be very fun to hear. I can say that, the cabinets are still sort of an open question of mine. I think it's probably that Marshall cabinet with some type of vintage style speaker, and maybe an angle cabinet, because I did think that he had an angle cabinet all the way back then. And then finally, at that time, I also know that Studio Fredman, Fredrik Nordström had already started using his famous Fredman technique. So I'm pretty sure that we're also listening to some Fredman mic'd cabinets here with a bunch of SM57s. So I think the Fredman miking technique is interesting and something that could be worth talking more about in the future. But yeah, maybe look for some cabinets that has the Fredman miking technique or a blend of two different microphones in order to approximate the Opeth sound. Anyway, that's it for this time. Thank you very much for stopping by. And again, if somebody has like an obscure old reference for like studio picture or something like that, I would love to hear it. But that's, Thank you for now.